We appreciate you taking a few moments with us. Wanted to touch on the topic of test taking some of our lock features. Probably you're thinking, well, what about like a month ago, right before we did testing? We got a lot of questions of test taking with Kurzweil, and Callis has volunteered at Kurzweil, said, hey, why don't I do a webinar on some of the lock features that currently exist, demonstrate read the web and how to use read the web with testing so that you get a framework to think about it for your next testing cycle. And then one of the things I heard on the listserv a lot was ATI and the nursing testing and it not being accessible. We've spent a year trying to contact them. Most recently, my business development manager got on the phone, and all I'm going to say about this is right now the best way to approach ATI is in mass as customers. They're not very anxious to work with us. They feel they have a solution. They feel like we're trying to sell them something. We're not. We're trying to just make their prominently used testing platform accessible. So if you think about it, if you have a contact and you want to say, as a Kurzweil customer, say, just respond to Kurzweil. Kurzweil for free will help whitelist Kurzweil. It will ease some of the troubles that you are all having with using ATI for their nursing examinations. So I shouldn't assume. My name's Corey. I'm the general manager for Kurzweil, and Callis is going to do a short presentation on allowing you to see some of the lock features for Kurzweil and how they can be used with your next exam cycle. Callis?
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start with this screen over here. As Corey mentioned, test taking tips and tricks, we're going to have some focus on the lock features. We do work really well with Respondus, and some other browsers do allow whitelisting. So if you do have a lockdown or a testing browser that you're using and you can't open Kurzweil in it, first thing you want to do is reach out to that particular company and see if you can whitelist Kurzweil. If not, then it's something that we need to work with them. Generally, that comes, as Corey said, from you guys. He specifically mentioned ATI. That is one we do hear a lot. With Respondus, they did eventually whitelist Kurzweil, and that really came from pressure from you guys. So if there is a lockdown browser that you do use that you can whitelist Kurzweil in and it works really well, go ahead and share it in the chat, because that is a question we get a lot. You guys, being the end users, are actually a little more familiar with some of those than we are. If you want to throw that in the chat and share it, that would be great. So we have two types of feature locks. One is profile locks, and that's if you have a web subscription, and that is in Kurzweil3000.com. The other one is document locks, and this is based on your computer. Then you add it to the document. It is not by profile, it is by document or by computer that the individual is using. This works both if you have the installed desk client with your web subscription, or if you're using a standalone, which we do have people that do in their testing centers. Just a quick view here, the feature locks in the web subscription, you go to the My Account and Users, and then to the feature locks. I've gone along here and just locked up a couple profiles. It is by the individual, whereas with the document locks, this is a screenshot from the installed desktop client. I do it by the machine. So I go and I pick those feature locks, and if I want to, I can copy it to the document, and I'll cover those a little bit more. So there's a couple things that you can do to prep Kurzweil for test taking. Is you can load a custom toolbar. We have test prep and test taking. You can hide buttons in the desktop client. So if there's features that you don't want available during testing, you can hide those. And you can password protect both your settings and the toolbar that you choose. You can prep the document as well. Zone editing is an important thing to make sure it's going to read well for you. Edit underlying text. If you've got a chemistry or biology, something that's got some really funky wordage, you want to make sure that it read it well, or maybe the document you got wasn't super clear. I'll show you fill in the blanks. If you have a fill in the blank test, we have a great way of quickly adding the text boxes. The custom toolbar I mentioned, you can also password protect the document itself, so the student can't open it until you give them the password, and you can use a note to add instructions. Another great thing that you can do in test taking is text notes are designed for a fill-in-the-blank answer. They're a little bit cleaner and neater when you go back and review the test or you print it. Bubble notes, if you want a really interactive, big question, and then voice notes for individuals that have mobility challenges or you just want to give a quick instruction. Testing profiles is a great thing to use if you have the web license. You take a student license or two and you create a testing profile. And a lot of people do that because it allows you to just go in and set the lock features in advance. You don't have to, oh, Joe has this, but Sally doesn't. Go back and forth so much. You can just pretty much prep it in advance, leave that as your default, and go in and tweak it if you need to. You can load the tests in advance into that profile. And so if the student's coming into a testing center or your lab, you get it the day before, you can load it up, you throw it in that testing profile. And when they came in, you say, oh, you're a testing profile too. If it's password protected, you can put more than one document in there, but they can't access anything but their own test. I'm going to go ahead and switch screens here. So I'm here and this is the desktop client, and I'm going to show you some of these features in here first because I think it's a really great way to show you a few of the extra tools we have that you're less familiar with. So I can come in here. I'm going to open an item from my library. In my public folder, I created a test prep folder. I do that by right-clicking on public folder and then add a new folder. So I go into test prep. I have a time travel quiz. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. Now this is a nice, let me zoom out a little bit, a nice fill in the blank type test here with some multiple choice. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the tools menu, and then under the tools menu, I have a fill in the blanks option. I'm going to click that. What that does is that inserts a text box on each line that it thinks is, hey, this is a fill in the blank line. Now, occasionally it might miss a line. If it does that, on the left, I have the add a text note icon with the big capital A on it. I click on that, and then I click my cursor where I want that note to be. If it puts a note in the wrong place, I right click on the note and click delete note, and then I have to confirm yes. So the nice thing about these is they start small, but I click into them and I just start typing and it will expand as I type. And it keeps my page nice and neat. And you see, once I typed here, the box actually went away. This is a really nice, quick way if you have a multiple choice test to prep it. It spaces them nicely and then it keeps it nice and clean. I'm sorry, for a fill in the blank. For a multiple choice, of course, you can use the highlights or the circle tools and the cross out tool. So you can circle the right answer, you can cross out one they know is wrong. Now, I did also mention the test prep toolbar. So if I have a toolbar, just say my default here in my toolbar on the left, I can right click. The third option, load a toolbar set. I can do the drop down and pick what I want. I have a number of different items, test preparations. The one I actually have is my custom item. So I loaded that just as an individual item. You see it brought it down. Instead of having read, write, scan, and test prep, I just have test prep. I have zone editing here. It's a good idea to double check a test because it's really important it reads well for the student, especially if there's graphics and other things like that. So zone editing, again, if I've got something that's got unusual language or I got a hard copy that's not real clear, I can do edit underlying text and make sure it's reading each word exactly as it's supposed to be. That's all right here on this item. I can add my text notes. I can add a bubble note if I want to, a sticky note if I want to add some instructions. So there's a lot of really nice things here. Once I've got it prepped, I'm just going to go ahead and save that. I'm just going to do File, Save. I can load a new toolbar set now if I want to change it to test taking. Okay. and it changes that. And then if there's something on here that I don't want them to have, maybe the dictionary or the highlighters. I don't know what I would want to take off of here. This one's translate function. We'll take translate off. So I right click on translate and click delete. And that way, if it's a Spanish English test, they can't use the translation function. The other item that we talked about was document locks. Now, document locks are the original way that you could do locks in Kurzweil before we came out with the web license. It's also the way you would still do it using a desktop client or a standalone, or if you want the lock to follow the document, not necessarily the profile. So the way it works is once I set those locks, I add them to the document, I can put it in a student's folder and they just sit there dormant basically until the student opens that document. As soon as they open the document, it locks up their computer. Then it stays locked until they close that document, sign out, and sign back in. So let's take a quick look at how we do that. So I go to Tools and Feature Locks down here towards the bottom. And then down the left tool panel here, I've got 7 different options. I've got reading, writing, online, you can see. So maybe I'm going to click in the online. I don't want them to be able to do online content. I don't want them to use the translation function or Google Drive. So what I'm doing right now is this is under the machine setting column. I am locking up the machine, not the test. So what I do once I have those locks set on my computer, I go to File and I go to Properties and Save Feature Locks in Document is the second option. I'm going to click on that. I can tab through the options and then I would use the space bar to check it, or I can click it with the mouse. Once I have done that, it gives me the option of password for opening document. So I can set a password. If I do that, I need to make sure I remember it. Otherwise, I've locked myself out. I'm just going to click OK. It warns me, hey, be careful because you can't undo this. Now, what I've done is I've taken those feature locks from my computer to this document. So I can send it out to 7 different people. They can take it whenever they want to, and once they open it, it locks their computer then and there. Once they're done, they close it, they sign out, they sign back in, it refreshes the computer, it opens it back up unlocked. So I don't have to worry about what profile they're under if they're not in a situation where I can control that. When they're remote, this is a really nice way to make sure that those feature locks are being used. Now, the other type that we have are the profile locks, and those are in Kurzweil3000.com with the web subscription. I go to the My Account tab and down to Users. And then on the Users page, I'm going to click on this padlock icon for Team Feature Locks. The way this is set up is I've got the locks. I've got 6 tabs of different options. And then the lock options are in the headers of the columns. The students are down the rows on the left side. So if I have a testing profile, which I do, profile testing right here, I'm going to go pick that in the row I need, and then I'm going to go across and decide which ones I want to lock. So I have brainstorm and outline locked. If I want to lock spell check, I just check it. Then it lets me know, oh, I already had some on here. It turned orange. Then I do need to click save before I go to the next tab, or it'll say, oh, you had stuff on here. I can just click through the tabs and check and see what I've already got locked. And I pretty much have everything locked already just as a demo. Once the test is done, if I want to unlock it, or say I have a student that has more accommodations and I need to unlock something, I can do that. Or if I have 2 or 3 testing profiles, I can have different locks on them. That's why it's really useful to have the testing profile, because then I don't know what Johan here, I don't know what accommodations he has already locked. I don't have to worry about that if I know what I have on my testing profile. A lot of schools use that. This one is really, really nice because I don't have to go into the individual document. If it's not convenient, I didn't get it early enough, I can just do it right there on the spot. The profile locks are really easy to use. Once I've saved them, they're there until I take them off. So those are the two major types of feature locks that we have. Well, the two types. Again, let's go back to my Universal Library. I'm going to open my test prep folder. Once I have a test prepared, I can check on the box to the left of the title. I'm going to do Control and drag, and I'm going to put it down here in my testing profile. And it's just going to sit there until that student, whoops, I didn't open the folder right. Let's do that again. I'll just do them both. I'm going to put it in the public folder of the test prep. It tells me it was copied, and that's ready whenever my student comes in. They're in there. If they're password protected, say my time travel quiz is for John and my math test is for Mary, I give John his password, and then when Mary comes in, I give her her password. So it makes it really nice and easy to manage. So now I'm going to do another item here. This is a math item, and math is something that we are actively researching what's available in the industry. How can we implement something, as soon as something decent and workable is available? That's something we're very interested in. And in the interim, math is just going to continue to be a bit of a challenge for all of us. If I have a word problem like this one, it's going to read it quite well. There's nothing really weird about m plus h equals 5. It'll read that. But when I come down and I see funky stuff like this, it's going to read this. It might read the parentheses. Minus 3a2 b2 4a 5b3 3. That's not very intelligible. Kind of the best option, and here's a edit underlying text. I went ahead and I manually typed out what that would be. Now, one of the challenges, again, with math is some schools say, oh, well, I need to tell them open parentheses, close parentheses. I need to tell them multiply, divide. Some people are like, it's their job once they can read it to know what it means. So I would have it read open parentheses, negative 3ab squared, or a squared b squared, close parentheses, open parentheses, 4a to the fifth, b to the third, close parentheses cubed. That's up to your school how you want to do that. This can be really time consuming. So an idea that we've come up with, and we haven't really implemented this with anybody. And so if you want to try this and give us some feedback, we'd be happy to hear it, but using a voice note. I went ahead and I did the underlying text for the problem, but for this one, I just did a quick voice note. A, negative 192, a to the eighth, b to the fifth. So this makes it for a really nice small icon. I can put it by each one. If I tried zone editing these answers when they're so close together, that would be really, really hard. To do one of these, I go into notes, I click voice notes. You notice the icon's a little microphone. The recording box is right about level with the top of the microphone. So I want to be careful where I stick my note. Otherwise, it's going to cover my problem. Let's start that again. I'm going to put my microphone a little bit below where I need it. A new recording. D, negative 192, a to the 17th, b to the 11th. Stop. I can listen to it. I can save it, and you can see it's right there. So that's an idea that we've had. If somebody wants to play with this and give us feedback, we'd love to hear it and let us know how well it works for you. You do have to do them one at a time. You can't just click, 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 click to add new notes, but it's still quite quick. I was able to do about 3 or 4 per minute. The other thing you want to be careful of, if you have a really big document like you're doing it in a math book, it really slows down how fast a document will open and close because there are so many of these. So that is one way that you can use voice notes. You can see here I've got a sticky note with just some extra information. We covered text notes. I can go in here under the document view, the page with the little magnifying glass, bottom left column, set document password. so I can just do that at any time before I give it out to the student. Bubble notes, if you're familiar with bubble notes, it's just a way if you want to do an inline open book test, an inline test in an English class. There's true, false, matching, multiple choice. I can put in an image and say, what is this? There's all sorts of things I can do with a bubble note. If more of a teacher wants to use that, they can. That's not so much that you would use for a test like in a testing center. So other ways tests come in for you guys. This is one I've heard from a school itself, was people getting hard copy tests that they brought in. I don't think that's happening as much as it used to before COVID and everybody went remote. But if you get a hard copy of a test, you can set up a station with a hover cam, probably put a little line, put your test right here so it's nice and aligned. You stick the test there, you just click a button to take a photo of it, and then you can either load that into Kurzweil, or if you've got the standalone and Windows 10 or less, it's deactivated in Windows 11, unfortunately. There is the Kurzweil taskbar that's got a screen reader that will read anything that's on my screen. So that's a great format if they come in, just here's my test. Here's another opportunity that I just kind of wanted to open this up for a few minutes. If you guys have seen another idea that works really well at your school that I didn't cover, because a lot of these ideas we actually get from you guys, the frontline user. So if you have an idea you want to share, you can go ahead and throw that in the chat or unmute yourself. I know Corey has been monitoring the chat, and we've already got 10 in there. Corey, do we have any questions that I need to answer?
Well, if you would like to answer this, Callis, somebody had asked, when there's chemistry questions, how do you handle those if the student does not know the lingo or what the formula means? That's probably a question for other participants versus you, Callis.
Yeah, if somebody wants to throw in that, my first response would be you could use the edit underlying text or a voice note to rephrase that for the student. But if someone's got a great suggestion that they've already used, go ahead and throw in your 2 bits.
I would say underline text editing.
We had a response from Jessica. I think working with the content teacher might help. Maybe they can help you record the audio as well, which is a good idea. If it needs to be stated in a specific way that's not clear from the text and you don't know what that is, the teachers sometimes have a very specific way they phrase things. My son's taking a physics class, and on his last test, he got a very poor score because he didn't set it up in the exact format the teacher wanted it in. So he had to go in and talk to the teacher and find out specifically what is that teacher looking for. So sometimes that is necessary. Any other ideas, suggestions, or questions? Oh, can you create a password on a doc file using Kurzweil 3000? Yes, you can. I showed that to you. You just go into the document view and set the password. Then if you're doing the document settings, the document locks, when you're setting those, it will ask you if you want to set a password to lock the toolbars, the features that you locked, or if you just want to do a general password log on the document, you can do that as well.
Do you have to save it as a CASI file first?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, oh, cool, we can do that with just Word documents.
Yeah, once you've loaded it into Kurzweil, that option becomes available. And when you load it and open it for the first time, it automatically converts it to a CASI document. So if you've got to open enough, you can see those tools, then yes, it's already converted. Also, with the chemistry question, if you go in Kurzweil3000.com under My Account and PDF Settings, if you are using OCR, click the Enable Remediated, I forgot the third word, something, and then it gives you the option Emphasize OCR Results, and then it allows you to pick the language and pick chemistry, and that will help with reading the symbols and things that are in chemistry, and it'll be more fluent for you.
Well,
Okay.
you went through a ton of stuff, Callis. That was good. One of the areas we're trying to help you out, stay abreast with is, I would imagine most of the delivery of exams and wanting Kurzweil to work with your online testing platforms. That is something. There was a question about Read the Web. you can click the icon and then have access to the Universal Library. And just last week, Sean Nelson brought that to my attention from one of you, and I talked to engineering. They said, no problem, we can make that so that you can turn off access to the Universal Library so that students don't have access to save something. So we're trying to be very responsive to what your needs are, especially with test taking.
That
How
was
would you
me,
turn
Corey.
off that feature?
So you would turn it off, and then that would just be blacked out, or it would be not available.
Yeah, you can't do it yet, but what we ended up doing,
Right.
Corey, was I ended up just creating a folder under that student's name under my profile in the UL, and then I just
Okay.
took all their books and just put them in under me, which they can't get. So then when they did click in there was no books because it wasn't an open book test, and the instructor was worried about them getting a hold of the book
Yeah.
online.
Okay.
So yeah, so thank you for working on that. That's great.
So what they were talking about here is if I log in and I click on the Kurzweil icon right here on the browser extension or on the highlighter tool, it will take me into Kurzweil3000.com. And then that gives them access to their library and stuff. So as Corey said, we're working on that. And then the lady just said, if you put them in under a testing profile or under your own profile that you create a generic student profile where there is nothing in the library, that does prevent them from being able to access stuff. So that's your workaround for right now, is that these two buttons will take them into Kurzweil3000.com. And for the moment, those are not lockable.
I was always under the understanding we should create a generic testing profile anyway. The students should never log in as themselves to take a test.
Having the testing
That's-
profile prevents a lot of
Yeah.
headaches that can come up. And so it
Yes.
is a good practice. A lot of schools do that.
Yeah, we do that, but you still can't lock down them getting into the library. So it was an
Mm.
issue with that,
Agreed.
just them being able to get
What?
into that library. The universal library where all
They
the books
should-
are housed. Yeah.
If they're under just the testing profile, they should be able
They
to
shouldn't
only
be
see
able
their
to, I
testing
know.
profile.
If you're creating a specific testing profile and they log in as testing 123 or whatever, and then there's no books, there's nothing in that universal library, they can see that individual profile, any teacher it's associated with, and the public folder of the top level coordinator. So those are the three things you want to be careful with if you're creating that profile. Keep it nice and clean is the public folder of the top level coordinator. If that person is not added to any other team, they won't see any other teachers. And then that student testing profile, it's really easy just to leave empty. So that is the two folders in particular you want to be careful with, but that does help with that issue quite significantly.
It does. And our situation was it was a home test. So it was online at home, and there was no way to verify. They weren't able to use a secondary computer lock into the teacher was very worried. It was their final, and she said, I don't want them accessing their books in any way. So that's why we decided to go ahead and just pull the books from their profile.
Yeah, because you can always put them back in at any time. So that's another option. Okay. Any other ideas, suggestions, questions, things I missed?
This is Bonnie again. I have a quick question. Callis, could you go over how you did real fast about the language picking chemistry through the OCR?
Sure. Let me pull that screen back over here. Sure. So I come in to the Universal Library. I go to my account, and this used to say settings. So some of you might be familiar with that. We've updated PDF settings to be a little more specific. And then enable remediated processing. That was the third word. So I just check that box, and then I'm going to emphasize OCR result. Then I'm going to pick chemistry and probably English. Now, this is not going to be a perfect chemistry reader, doesn't know every nuance, but it will be better. I did get feedback on the mathematical from a gentleman in California that he was impressed with the improvement enough that he removed all of his math books from his library, re-uploaded them, and re-processed them using this new function. If you do have a document that came from the publisher with the embedded text already in it, go ahead and use that, because that should be accurate. Some publishers are starting to do that, so that is an option if you can get that. And then if not, just the OCR and chemistry.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks, Gallus. If you put up there, again, where the recordings are going to be, those aren't going to be sent out to you again. With each invite, there'll be a link to the channel, the YouTube channel. These recordings are all under the Power Users playlist.
I do believe I included that on the original invitation. If you don't see it, you just go to YouTube and you search for Kurzweil Education. It's the one with our little Kurzweil icon in a circle. Then there you'll click on the playlists, and one of the playlists is Power Users. And so that's where you'll see all of the videos for that. There is also under our Kurzweil Education channel, there's a playlist called Test Taking. It has some old videos. There was a very big demonstration done by a gentleman named Dan Hurley that some of you might remember. It really went into depth. It was a really, really good video, but it was really long. So I tried to chunk it up a little bit and we posted it. It's a little bit harder to follow because it is chunked, but it really goes into detail of a lot of those things if you want to review that and see what's there in addition to what you see from today.
However you got the invite, whatever is your representative, ask them to go over these concepts again with you, because this was great job, Cal, and lots of information. So if you have a few questions, one of your representatives would be happy to do a webinar.
I have a quick question for Kellis.
Yes.
Where you were at in the PDF scanning settings, I noticed you can't pick more than 3 languages.
Correct.
Are you guys going to change that at any time? Because otherwise I have to keep going back and forth to put Spanish back in there.
Well, the purpose of keeping it minimal is to make sure that the system is reading it properly. If I'm reading a book about Latin America and it's got all those Spanish names and I leave Spanish in there, it's going to try and read some of my paragraphs in Spanish. So that's where I take the Spanish out. So it says, okay, this is English only, or it might think some of it's French. I've actually seen that more often than I would have expected. And that's why you want to keep it limited, is to say, hey, this is an English text unless it's a bilingual text. So
okay, that makes sense. Cool.
Limited will keep your OCR a lot more accurate.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I have a quick question. Rose mentioned that the students can use Read the Web for their Canvas documents. We have an instructor who will be giving a test in Canvas, but he does not want the student to be able to access the internet. So can I lock this in Canvas so that they cannot access the internet?
In the lock features, you can lock Google Drive, OneDrive, some things like that. There isn't a way to lock the entire internet because I believe to be on Canvas, they have to be on the internet.
Right,
Yes.
right.
And but the browser extension does require the internet. Now, if it's a test that they can download as a document, then you can put it into Kurzweil 3000 .com, the standalone. And the standalone can work offline. But if it's on Canvas, on the internet, you can't block everything. That's where a lockdown browser would come into effect.
Okay, thank you.
And that's another question, was what we're trying to do related to this is so that within Read the Web, there's no way to get out of Canvas using Read the Web. So maybe turning off the highlighters, which allow you to extract into Kurzweil3000.com. We're playing around with eliminating that so that there's nothing within Kurzweil's Read the Web that takes you like as an escape to the internet.
Yeah, but if you're wanting to like block them from opening other tabs and stuff, that's where your lockdown browsers come in. And then that limits what they can do.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much.